Why are there so many shows starring Muppets and dozens of movies too? They said they'd watch everyone and they mean it. It's something that they've got to do. So now they've pledged you a lifelong commitment. The Muppets, Matthew and Sam.
Welcome to Commitment, the podcast where two friends have vowed to watch all things Muppets. I'm Matthew Gatos.
And I'm Sam Schultz.
And this week we watched the 1969 television special Hey Cinderella, which brings us into the Tales from Muppet Land era of the podcast, which will be brief, but it's something that they tried to get going. As a little bonus, we also watched a 4-minute Wizard of Id pilot that they made in 1969, mostly because it was the last thing we had to watch from the 60s besides Hey Cinderella, so we watched that as well. And yeah, both of those things are available on YouTube if you want to check those out. But we are now done with the 60s. We've now been through the first 15-ish years, 15, 16 years of the Muppets' career, starting off with their TV appearances and Sam and Friends and stuff in 1954 and 1955. And 15 years is a pretty good run to get to where they're now at with Sesame Street. Obviously, is probably felt like they were peaking at a certain level. But how do you feel so far about this first 15 years?
A 15-year career where you're on the Jimmy Dean show for 3 or 4 of those years, that ain't bad for someone's whole career, I would say. It feels like, I'm not sure if Sesame Street is taking up all of their time or they just don't really know what to do. That's what I feel like right now as of the end of the 60s. Because they're still making a bunch of commercials, I think, and they're probably mostly making Sesame Street. And I would be very curious to know if that to Jim is enough of a creative outlet, or if he is still at the same time looking for the next thing with the Muppets. And I don't know if that's just because we're not watching Sesame Street, so we're not getting the full impact of what that show is. But I know it's huge, from the minute it premieres, it's huge. So it probably feels huge for him. But it also feels like with some of this stuff, they're trying to find their new thing. They're still recovering from the end of the Jimmy Dean show almost.
And I do wonder if that has to do with sort of Jim's creative output and the idea of, all right, we've got the Sesame Street going, but I still have these stories I want to tell, and I still want to use Muppets in different ways that aren't just for teaching preschoolers. And I think this Tales from Muppet Land era that we get into with Hey Cinderella, The Great Santa Claus Switch, and The Frog Prince feels like that outlet for him.
Mm-hmm. And it's also weird that for some reason they're trying to keep doing Tinker-D. That's the thing they keep coming back to. And I don't understand that compulsion to do it and to not shove those puppets down people's throat, but just they must have really believed in that king puppet.
We'll get into this a bit. I think one of my issues with some of these early experiments, I guess, in filmmaking and television specials is that they don't feel like established characters, which obviously they're not going to be early on. But I think something that works really well in things like Muppet Christmas Carol and Muppet Wizard of Oz, to a lesser extent, is that we know these characters and they're actors that we like. And so we like watching Fozzie play the Cowardly Lion. We like watching Gonzo play Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens? Why did that just sound weird coming out of my mouth? That's his name.
That's him, right?
Yeah. Those. I was like, that's definitely his name. So watching just sort of anything Muppets play the ugly stepsisters in Hey Cinderella or the prime minister of this kingdom, I don't have that attachment to them, which again isn't obviously their fault. This was the first time that they were trying some of these things, but that's sort of where some of the disconnect I think we both maybe felt with Hey Cinderella that we'll talk about comes from, is not having that sort of linchpin. Whereas King Gosh Posh is kind of that only one, aside from Kermit, that we get repeatedly being used He's not always known as King Gosh Posh, but he's the same puppet
Yeah.
with a very similar personality.
But you had to have been pretty lucky in the 60s to have seen him on the Mike Douglas show. And and you've never seen him on Tinkerdy because that just wasn't publicly available.
That's also like what I have to remember as we go through and watch these things is that most people, this is probably the only time they saw some of these puppets. Like, they didn't necessarily see Splurge on the Ed Sullivan Show a couple years before they saw him in Hey Cinderella. Some people probably didn't see Kermit aside from this and Sesame Street, because this aired in the U.S. after Sesame Street had premiered. So people were like, hey, it's the frog from Sesame Street. That's the frog I know.
I read that it made people mad because he was like doing commercials during the show.
Well, yeah, the Hey Cinderella U.S. premiere was sponsored by a tobacco company. And so this was like one of the first times people were like, Muppets are getting canceled. Because it was, people were assuming, I guess, that because Kermit was promoting a tobacco company, that he wouldn't be allowed on the second season of Sesame Street.
And he wasn't on the second season of Sesame Street.
Was he not?
No.
Oh, but he came back later.
Then he came back, yeah.
Interesting.
Kermit did indeed get canceled in 1969.
Yeah, for a lot of people, Hey Cinderella was probably their first introduction to the idea of the Muppets telling, like, stories.
That's weird. Yeah, I guess I haven't thought about it that way. It might even be, like, so they don't even know about Sam and Friends, probably, most of them, unless they lived in Washington, D.C. and were paying attention 15 years ago. So
I feel like a lot of people now don't know about Sam and Friends.
Yeah. So maybe, like, who is Jim Henson to these people? He is maybe the guy who did Rolf, but seems like that kind of, like, dropped out of public perception immediately after it ended. And then, like, the LaChoy Dragon? Is that why people know what Muppets are at this point?
I would say, like, for the parents who are maybe tuning into this, it's probably that guy they've seen on Ed Sullivan a few times. And then for the kids, if it's the U.S. kids after the Sesame Street already had their premiere, it's those things from Sesame Street.
Yeah.
So I think there's something in it for the adults and something in it for the kids, but it's still a very new thing. But yeah, we've wrapped up the 60s now. We're looking forward to the 70s. We've got the decade of the Muppet Show and all that jazz coming up. Are you feeling optimistic about the early 70s?
No, I'm not feeling optimistic about any of these Tales from Muppet Land movies. I think some of the variety show stuff will be fun. And I think once we get into the Muppet Show, that will be great. And then we'll be like on a roll. Hey Cinderella just kind of took it out of me.
Well, before we get to that, let's take a little slight detour here. I just need to talk about a thing I did this week that's Muppet related, but doesn't really fit into like a full conversation. But I wanted to update everyone. There's a Fairy Con this past weekend, which I believe was in New York. It's like with libraries and pop culture conference kind of thing that goes on. They did their online version, obviously, because of what's happening in the world. But they did a panel that was with Karen Falk and Craig Shemin. Karen Falk is a historian who serves as the head archivist for the Jim Henson Company, and she wrote the Imagination Illustrated book, which I know I have. I think Sam owns as well. And she also used to run the website blog Jim's Red Book, which is like Jim's notebook writings and like basically just like a timeline of Jim Henson's life.
It's like a little diary he had, right? Where
he basically kept this book that was very thorough from like the early 60s through mid to late 60s. That was like every day he would write down what he did that day, whether it was like flew to LA to talk to this person about the Muppets, filmed an episode of Ed Sullivan, did this thing, built Rolf. And it's a really fascinating thing, and I think the Imagination Illustrated book does a good job of sort of translating his journal into a readable thing. And they talked about that a little bit and how he, at a certain point, sort of stopped doing the day-to-day stuff as he got busier in the late 60s. And then he would just do like a year-end recap of like, here's everything that happened in 1968. So I think like once Sesame Street started picking up, he was just like, I don't have time to do day-to-day journals. But Craig Shemin, who was also on the panel, is a former Jim Henson Company staff writer. He also serves as the president of the Jim Henson Legacy, which sort of seems to be like an organization just to keep the Jim Henson name in good standing.
Uh-huh.
And he's done a lot of writing with the Muppets. More recently, he wrote the Muppet Character Encyclopedia, which I have now ordered and is on its way, because when they were talking about it, I realized how helpful it's going to be for like Muppet of the Week segments. But it's like one of those big like visual encyclopedias they put out for things like Star Wars and all that, where each page has a character that's like, here's the whole page about Miss Piggy and her whole history, and fun facts and stuff. So he put that together. He's also now, the reason this panel was existing and the main reason I tuned in is that he's working on a book called Sam and Friends that is entirely about the Sam and Friends era of the Muppets. And so I just thought I would share that news with you, that one that's happening, and then some little interesting tidbits that I learned from the panel. And it was really odd. I saw this like being tweeted about and checked it out, and there was only like 15 people there like watching this panel. So it was really small, and a bunch of people, like, we got our questions answered about the book and all that stuff. So that was fun.
When you asked your question, did you say, Matt Gatos from the Commitment Podcast here?
I did not. It was all through the chat feature. We did not get to actually speak to them. So it was just quick little chat questions. But some of the things that sort of relate to our podcast that I thought were interesting is that he mentioned specifically those reel-to-reel tapes of the like 400 audio recordings of those Sam and Friends episodes that we talked about that don't exist anywhere except for audio recording. And he listened to those. He went through those. They've like archived and digitized them and everything now for the process of like archiving them, but also for his book. And so informing his book will be 400 plus episodes of Sam and Friends. He also got to go to the SK Meat Company and like talk to them and go through their archives of what they have, whether it's scripts or receipts or ledgers, or even if they have like sets and puppets left over. And he also got to go to the TV studio where Sam and Friends was produced, which he was talking about some of these things. And it's just wild. Again, we talked about this a lot in the Sam and Friends episode of how it didn't feel like a show. Like, it didn't feel like there was a through line. It didn't feel like there was a lot of original things happening. A lot of it was just lip syncing to records. But he talked about episodes where the TV studio they recorded Sam and Friends in was the same TV studio that the Nixon-Kennedy debate happened in. And they were like recording the same week. And so there's an episode of Sam and Friends where the puppets are all commenting that like the TV studio is taking away their gear to go use it on the debate. So they have like less equipment to use that episode.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? Like, there was like political commentary happening on
that's the
Sam and
vibe
Friends.
From those longer SK Meat commercials, I think by the end of Sam and Friends, it must have been much more like a Muppet Show type show.
Well, and he said that there's even episodes where Kermit is preparing questions for the debate. Like, he's told that like he's going to be moderating it, and so he's preparing questions. And then there's an episode where Sam is running for president.
What?
Yeah.
He got to actually do stuff?
Yeah. And apparently, as part of the book, they're going to print like 5 or 6 full scripts from some of those episodes. And the debate episode is one of them that's going to have a full script printed in the book.
Is it just scripts that exist, or are there any of, like, is every episode we saw all that exists?
That seemed to be the
form?
case.
That's too bad.
Which, if you're listening to the two people who run the Jim Henson archives and they're saying only a dozen exist, seems like probably only a dozen exist. Unfortunately, they didn't really hint that there was any plans to release any of the audio stuff outside of potentially places like the Museum of the Moving Image or the Paley Center, like these places that have these constant Jim Henson like exhibits.
What? Yeah. Why don't they just put that stuff online? I don't understand that really.
Yeah, I don't know either. There was a couple times that sort of seemed like a pain point where they would bring up something like, oh yeah, you can watch those old commercials on YouTube. And Karen Falk would jump in and be like, or you can watch them at the Museum of the Moving Image.
Yeah, but how many people are going to get to go? That it just seems so weird.
Yeah, but he said that the book is basically broken into 2 parts. So the first part of the book will be a history of the show, a history of Sam and Friends, how it came to be, what it was, how it was made. And then the second part will be like a breakdown and summarizing every known episode of Sam and Friends.
Okay.
So like a full rundown of the stories that were being told on the episodes, which is the stuff that we have a harder time learning about because we just haven't heard or seen those things.
Right.
But yeah, there's no release date for the book yet. He said there's basically like a finished manuscript now. It's probably going to be released sometime early next year, he said.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like he's been working on it for a while as well, because he referenced like interviews with people who have since died. Like he interviewed, or at least got to talk to Jane Henson at some point about this. He was able to interview Bob Payne, who I think is still alive, but he was a college friend of Jim and Jane's and was a substitute puppeteer on Sam and Friends.
Oh, cool.
When Jim Henson went to Europe, this guy just like stepped in and was like, "I'm Kermit now."
He probably has a lot of insight about how much Jane had to do with like directing the show.
Yeah, and so I think I'm excited to read those types of things that were just like, as he talked about it, it's this stuff that in other biographies and things people don't seem to care about. But yeah, it was a really interesting conversation just to obviously hear two people who I know, at least Craig worked with Jim. He started off as an intern in 1987 with the Jim Henson Company. And just talking about all of the books that the archives have basically been able to help create, that like so many of these things that existed before the archives really started to be a thing, which seemed to be in maybe like the late 80s or maybe even mid 90s, when they really started thinking about like, what should we do with all this stuff? And they were talking about how there used to be like museum exhibits and all these things, but like none of them really involved any like archival materials. They were all just like, here's the puppets.
Yeah.
Whereas now with all of the things they've been preserving, they can have Jim's artwork and sketches and original papers. They were talking about going through and digging through the archives and finding old ledgers and receipts from the days of Sam and Friends of like, here's a receipt where Jim went and bought the record for that lip sync that they were going to do at this record store in Washington, D.C.
Uh-huh.
And they teased sort of like, Craig Shemin talked about sort of his dream project would be a vinyl or a CD music release that's like called like Jim's Record Collection. That would be a mixture of a lot of these songs as well as the recordings of some of these sketches. It's sort of like a Sam and Friends Ultimate Collection.
That would be great. Yeah.
But Karen Falk kind of brought that down to earth of like, that sounds expensive and like a lot of rights issues would be involved for a project that not a ton of people might buy.
Well, just digitally release the freaking audio recordings. Let people download them for money or something.
Yeah.
Like,
they did say that it could potentially be something like a radio show or a podcast in some form, because like there's less rights issues if you're not selling it, but if you're releasing it in some form. So
right.
Yeah, that would be cool. But regardless,
who owns the rights to Sam and Friends? Is it public domain or something?
They didn't actually touch on that. But it seemed like maybe the TV company, because I know Jim Henson always like had the rights to his puppets and his characters, but I think the skits themselves might be property of the TV station.
Huh. That is something I've been wondering. Like, we should talk about Hey Cinderella eventually, but it seems so weird to me that especially now that he's getting back at the period that we're on in our watch through to doing storytelling with like puppet characters as some of the main characters, it seems so weird to me that he has just discarded all of the Sam and Friends cast except Kermit. Like that wet hay hillbilly character was in one of the SK Meats commercials, or like Harry the Hipster. Like, I wonder what, and I almost thought maybe it would be like a rights issue, but I wonder why he got rid of all of those characters that probably had like personalities and like distinct voices, and they could have just rebuilt as like better puppets if they had wanted to.
Yeah, I wonder if it just is coinciding with the Don Celine puppet revolution that they sort of had, where it was like, oh my God, we can do all these way cooler, complicated puppets. Why would we just have Harry the Hipster, who's a sock puppet with sunglasses?
Yeah, that's true. But then why did Kermit get to live through all of it?
Maybe Jim just loved Kermit.
Just like the little guy. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about what we're here to talk about today. It's Hey Cinderella and also Wizard of Id, but mostly Hey Cinderella. What is Hey Cinderella, Sam? And did you in fact hate it as much as you predicted you would?
In 1965, John Stone and Tom Whedon came up with an idea for a TV show based on Snow White. I have no idea what that means or what it would look like, and it seems like a really terrible idea, but they signed Jim Henson on with his Muppets crew to help make puppets and perform puppets for it. But and I assume they made a pitch pilot or something, and they pitched it, but the network they pitched it to passed. Then another network was interested in this idea, but they wanted it to be about Cinderella instead of Snow White, which to me seems like an even worse idea, because at least with Snow White you have like 7 goofy characters you can play around with, but Cinderella doesn't even really have any friends. So the network passed on that after they pitched it. I think the same crew pitched it. But for some reason, Jim must have really liked the ideas that they were coming up with in these pilots, because he expanded the Cinderella pilot into an hour-long TV special that Stone and Whedon wrote and that Jim directed. It was filmed in Canada in 1968 and has the stink of Canada all over it, in my opinion, and aired there in 1969 and then aired in America in early 1970, right after Sesame Street debuted. So here is what Hey Cinderella, the end product of all of that, is about. This is kind of long because it's a convoluted thing for being only 40 minutes long. Cinderella, per usual for Cinderella, lives with her stepmother and 2 mean stepsisters who treat her like garbage. One day she's out walking in the royal garden, getting her feet dirty so she can go back home and get the kitchen floors dirty so she can clean them at her stepmother's request, when she runs into the prince who's working in the garden. The prince is all mopey because his dad wants him to marry for status and the prince wants to marry for love. But whenever he meets somebody and they find out he's the prince, then they get all weird about it. So anyway, he is dressed like a gardener because he's in the garden, and Cinderella has never seen the prince, so he tells her that he's a gardener, and they basically instantly fall in love, and the prince figures out a way to get her invited to the royal masquerade ball, where they both plan to wear a flower so that they can recognize each other, and also Kermit is there, basically just to be like the prince's sassy confidant, and he just lives in the fountain in the garden. So Cinderella asks her stepmother to go to the ball, and her stepmother says she can if she has new clothes and a carriage to take her, which seems impossible. So Cinderella starts crying, and her fairy godmother, who's like a corny prop comedian or something in this version.
She's the Carrot Top of her day.
Yeah, she's like a Gallagher Carrot Top type situation.
It's like a Gallagher who forgot his hammer. So he's just like, I have a watermelon.
Just gesturing to a pumpkin, yeah. So she appears out of nowhere. She gives Cinderella a nice gown and makes a pumpkin into a carriage, and then goes to the garden to convince Kermit and his friend, who's a giant purple monster named Splurge, to drive the carriage. Cinderella goes to the ball, but it turns out the king is giving the same flower that they were going to wear to everybody who goes to the ball as a gift. So everybody has flowers on, and she doesn't know who the person she's looking for is. So when she's at the ball, she runs into the prince, but she doesn't know that he's the gardener, and he doesn't know that she's Cinderella. So they spend a really nice evening, like dancing and falling in love all over again, but they're always still looking for the person that they were supposed to be at the ball with, not realizing that they are with that person because they're both idiots. So then at midnight, Cinderella runs away and leaves her slipper. The prince breaks it in this version of it, just to be wackier, I guess. And then the next day, the king decides that the prince is going to marry the lady he was dancing with all night, because obviously he likes her and obviously she's a classy lady. So he assembles his whole resources to find her. Cinderella knows that they're looking for her, but she doesn't want to marry the prince. She wants to marry the gardener. But if they find the glass slipper that she still has, they'll know that it was her and she'll have to marry the prince. So she has her dog Rufus, who is Rufus, that we've talked about before, except completely ruined, character assassinated.
He's just still weird, like, we talked about this from the Muppet Puppet Plays, where he just pants, and he just does weird panting noises that don't even sound dog-like. It's just,
no, they're wheezing. They're creepy.
Yeah, he's very off-putting. Like, he's very cute still, but his actions and his responses to things are just, I don't like him.
He sounds just like he's very sick. So Rufus is stupid, and he never remembers where he buries anything. So she has him bury the glass slipper so that no one will ever find it. Then the prince shows up because they're looking in like all the poorest places because they know this lady's hiding from them. So they're looking at the place she's least likely to be. She figures out that he is the gardener that she fell in love with, but now he doesn't believe her that she is the lady from the ball because he thinks she's just trying to marry him, but he's supposed to find the lady from the ball to marry her. So they can't find the slipper, and Cinderella's freaking out. Rufus can't find the slipper because he's stupid, as previously mentioned, but Splurge, the big purple monster, finds the slipper because it's in his like radish garden or something, and then everything is sorted out, and they live happily ever after. Back in the real world, in terms of Henson collaborators of the future, Joe Raposo, who we talked about in the Sesame Street episode, was brought on to do music for this movie, and he'll do all of the most important songs for Sesame Street, basically. John Stone was the producer and director of Sesame Street from the very beginning of the show until his death in 1997. And Jerry Nelson had, if not his first major speaking role in this show as Featherstone, who's like the king's right-hand man. And Tom Whedon, the other creator of this whole concept, is the father of Joss Whedon, of course.
Yeah, that was wild. Where it was like, you see the name, you're like, okay, Whedon, whatever. And then you're like, oh, no, he's actually just, the dad of Joss Whedon.
Yeah, so Joss Whedon probably was like on set, maybe.
Yeah, because Tom Whedon went on to do a bunch of other stuff. But the reason this all sort of came together was that John Stone and Tom Whedon were both working as writers on Captain Kangaroo.
Mm-hmm.
And so they worked together on that. Tom Whedon went on to work on The Electric Company, whereas John Stone went on to work on Sesame Street.
Which is like the sister show of Sesame Street, basically.
Yeah, it was also owned by CTW.
Mm-hmm. So
it was related, and there's some crossover episodes that we'll get to in future episodes. But yeah, this was the first pairing of all these people, which we talked about last time. This was the seed of Sesame Street was planted here. Actually, it was planted with the 1964 pilot they filmed for the Cinderella thing, because that was the first time they all came together on this.
I would say the creative side of Sesame Street was created now, because Joan Cooney had this idea separate from any of them.
Absolutely. Sesame Street would have existed still, probably.
Yeah.
But what you picture as Sesame Street, which is the early animations, the set, the music, and the puppets, all of that was started with working on the Hey Cinderella project, because Joe Raposo was there. I read about Charles Rosen, who designed the set for Sesame Street, that he helped design what the wording was. This was from Jim's Red Book, is that he helped design the sets for the Cinderella projects. But somebody else is credited with set design and production design on Hey Cinderella. So I'm wondering if maybe he
look like shit.
Yeah, that too. But I'm wondering if maybe he was involved with the earlier pilot and then maybe didn't really come on for the second one.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just another sort of Sesame person who was involved with these people before Sesame Street. And then that guy went on to do production design for Taxi Driver, Flashdance, Free Willy, and From Justin to Kelly. So he had quite the career after doing Sesame Street. Man.
It's always so funny when you look up people like that who did the production design for Alien, and then they did the production design for Dumb and Dumber. It's what was your life like? Not that is a true thing, but
yeah, no, his last film was From Justin to Kelly.
Do you just sit there and reflect on having been part of one of the great, considered the greatest movies of all time? Now,
one of the worst of all time.
Amazing. So before we get into Hey Cinderella too much, we also watched Wizard of Id, which is a pitch reel for a series that was based on the Johnny Hart and Brant Parker comic strip of the same name. The pitch reel was filmed in 1969. Johnny Hart, you probably don't recognize his name, but he also created BC, which is a bad comic strip about cavemen. Wizard of Id is a bad comic strip about medieval times. And I guess, like I said, this was a pilot for a TV show or something, but I'm not really 100% sure. The gist of it is, it's almost like a traditional puppet show, like a Punch and Judy type thing almost. The king is a big dumb jerk, his subjects hate him, and he works with the wizard to keep his subjects in line and run the day-to-day affairs of the castle in wacky ways. And at the end, they all blow up and put a lampshade on the fact that Jim Henson makes the Muppets blow up in the end of everything that he does, which is kind of interesting. But otherwise, it's just straightforward and seems very low effort. And by the end of it, they seem bored of even the entire concept of the Wizard of Id, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't have much to say about this other than it's 4 minutes. If you feel like watching it, go ahead and watch it. But there is nothing you will gain by having watched this.
Feels like it's 8 minutes long, not 4 minutes.
It feels incredibly long. I think when I was first telling Sam that we were going to watch this and I sent it to him, I told him, I was like, this is not great. It feels much longer than it is. And you were 30 seconds in, you're like, I feel like I'm in hell. Because it very quickly just turns into this thing where they're just a lot of one-liners that aren't very funny.
It's just recreating comic strips,
Yeah, it just look at the camera, say a joke. But then it's not that's the end of the sketch. They just keep going and then keep doing that over and over.
The only kind of interesting thing I think about that is worth watching is that you can kind of, like I said, tell that they don't that they're not that into it, because by the end of it, at the end of every sketch, they're like doing funny dances and like flailing around, and it gets kind of like unhinged by the end, which is a little bit interesting. But mostly all in all, it sucks. It seems like when Jim Henson's people aren't writing Muppet material, this is my takeaway from Hey Cinderella too. That those shows aren't very good. But as for whether or not I hated Hey Cinderella, I didn't hate it. It was just really stupid.
Yeah, my biggest overall note was poorly made, but charming. So I think there are charming elements to it, but there are other parts that are so like reprehensibly bad as just like movie making goes. I just can't understand how they got through the editing room.
Okay, so what would you say? I have in mind what I think the worst part is, but what would you say that you're talking about when you say that?
For me, it's the ballroom scene at the end, because I think when this started off, I didn't really know what to expect. I think one thing I wanted to note, actually, that I think may be obvious from the way we talk about these over the last batch of episodes, but these early days things, like Sam and I, we have not seen most of these things. We are watching these for the first time. Muppet Movie, obviously, we started with. We've both seen that dozens of times, but I feel like I realized we had not mentioned in any of these episodes like if we had watched them before explicitly. So I think like I wanted to say explicitly, have not seen Hey Cinderella before, had barely heard of it before we started this project. And I know we're about to get into the era of some things that we have seen before in the mid 70s. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. Have not seen this. So in starting it off, I didn't really get what was happening because there was like this incessant music happening at the beginning. It just is like not stopping.
It's like a chorus that's singing what's kind of there, like singing supporting information that you'll need to know about the characters, but you can't understand what they're saying.
They're singing underneath people talking. So it's like I almost didn't realize they were telling part of the plot until the second time I watched this. It was like, wait, what did they just say? I need to go back and listen to that because I think they're just trying to be like this Greek chorus telling us what's about to happen, but not in any way that anyone can understand.
And their voices are extremely annoying.
Part of that, I think, is the quality at which we were able to watch this.
That's true.
It's not a very good copy. It's there's some sort of like VHS artifacting that happens a few times, and specifically like higher pitched voices are very, very hard to understand. The two stepsisters are almost impossible to understand at times.
I thought that was on purpose, maybe.
I don't know, but in going back and I watched it the second time with headphones, I was like, okay, I can understand what they're saying now, but barely still. But yeah, I think that for me, the ballroom was really where it hit this thing of like, oh, please let this be over soon. I didn't have that feeling for the beginning. I thought it was a little rough to start off with. The music bothered me, but I wasn't hating it.
It's cute enough.
Right. And then we get to the ballroom scene and I'm just like, oh boy, let's just wrap this up. Was that for you the same?
There's clearly only like 4 people at the ball.
Yeah.
And they're just in every scene. The worst part for me about the ballroom scene, it's cut extremely strangely, and it keeps cutting away to these musicians who are people, but they kind of look like Mana Muppet masks on.
It's like early versions of the mutation puppets that they have on the Muppet Show that are like men in tuxedos but wearing like furry monster hands and heads. But this is like the way, way creepier version of that.
They just look. Their heads are like human head size, but they have like creepy Muppet eyes and creepy Muppet nose, and they're like moving in very creepy ways, and they're like playing their instruments in very creepy ways, like these broken down weird instruments that don't match what the music is also that's happening in the ballroom scene, and it cuts to them like 5 times and they're so scary.
They look like men that were like turned into puppets as a curse. Like they just like it looks very human like in their features, but they're all felt.
It's almost like they have balloons stretched over their heads that are extremely tight, and you can see the contours of their human faces, and then they pasted Muppet pieces onto it. Yeah. It's bad.
Yeah, I could see a version of this where those men are like, free us, help us.
Or kill us.
Yeah, kill. I don't want to live.
Yeah.
But yeah, the editing in that is, one, it's very weird that it will cut to them. They'll start playing this super upbeat song, and 3 seconds later, it cuts back to the prince and Cinderella dancing, and it's the slow song again. And I don't know if that's in the version we watched, something happened, like if there's dropped frames or something. But the one copy we watched on archive.org, the one I watched, is a Laserdisc rip. So I have to believe that's in the original product. And I don't know if they were just trying to cover editing, because to me, what that ballroom scene feels like is where they ran out of ideas. Because the earlier stuff, what I don't like about it, whether it's the incessant music or the one weird musical number that they have, there's one song in this whole thing. Yeah. And it's weirder that there's only one song. But when they get to the ballroom scene, it feels like they had the idea of like, okay, they get to the ball, they have the flower exchange, and then the ball's over. What happens in the middle? And so it's like they're stretching it out with these dancing scenes, and I feel like they had to hide all of their jump cuts between the sections of people talking and dancing. And so they're like, I don't know, cut to the band again. What do we do?
Because you're right, because it is just Cinderella and the prince having one long conversation about how they can't find the people they're looking for, and I guess they're just showing the passage of time or something.
Yeah, and we don't get to see or talk to any of the other people at this ball who, again, like you said, there's like 8 people total at this ball. That is like, how will I ever find the person I'm looking for through all of these people? And it's like, there's 8 people there. Calm down. It's probably not the guy wearing a horse head. That's probably not the girl you're looking for.
No, there's only one other woman at the ball too, I think.
Yeah, I don't. It just feels like that's where it sort of fell apart, and I don't really. We obviously don't know why, but that's for me. It felt like they were stretching it out a lot more than it needed to be stretched.
Well, I mean, it's only like 45 minutes or something, and without that part, it would have only been like 30 minutes. So I guess they had to. But the rest of it is, like you said, actually fine. I think the fairy godmother is really funny. I think her scenes with Kermit when she's trying to convince him to be the footman for the coach are funny and cute. I think like Kermit is he's still being a bum and like a poo-pooer of everything. For some reason, he's got a terrible attitude, but...
And all of his scenes tend to end on a joke about him being a frog.
Yeah, he draws a lot of attention to the fact that he's a frog, which is strange.
Yeah, like we talked about before, of like this is sort of the first time very publicly he is a frog. Yeah. So maybe they were just trying to let everyone know, hey, he's a frog.
I mean, I guess also when you think about it, it's the first time he's premiered for a lot of people. Like this would be a lot of people in the country's first exposure to Kermit in general, right?
Yeah, but I do like him. I like Kermit in this, but I think it is also... They give his character a lot of interesting things that they don't give a lot of the other characters, which is like something they would do in future Muppet projects, is like give the Muppet the most interesting parts. But because he's such a side character, those moments are few and far between when you're like, oh, can we stick with Kermit a little bit longer? Because he's funny. But like his friendship with Splurge is very funny and good, that he just like has this muscle that like stands behind him and he can just like sick on people or make him do whatever he wants. Like I really
also
like
comes
that.
Out of nowhere halfway through the movie. But...
Yeah. Like, oh yeah, we need another Muppet. What about this giant purple Grimace looking guy?
Oh, speaking of, I have some stuff to say about the Grimace connection. We can talk about that in a little bit.
Let's say we can talk about that in our Muppet of the Week segment.
Oh, is it Splurge?
It is Splurge.
Okay. I also think it's weird that there aren't more Muppets in it almost. Like the one person in this movie who made me feel kind of sick for some reason was the wicked stepmother, because her nose is so pink. I just did not like looking at that. And like her whole like color palette, it's a very 70s color palette in general, but she just like, her colors like ooze off the screen in like a sickening way of her clothes and stuff. And I wish she had been like Tamanilla Grindelwald or something, you know? She should have been a Muppet too. There should have been all Muppets except for these 2 people. And it's almost all Muppets except for Cinderella and the Prince. But there's also the stepmother and then all of the weird people at the ball. So it just is like, doesn't know what it's supposed to be, is what the end result of that feels like.
Yeah, like I think the fairy godmother can work as a human. But I think having...
She was fun.
Like, I think nowadays, if they did that sort of thing, that would be definitely like a celebrity comedian they would have play the fairy godmother, which I think it kind of was at the time, too. Yeah. But I think it was, like you said, not enough Muppets. And so it almost felt like it didn't need to be a Muppet movie.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, so many of these other things, like Muppet Christmas Carol, work because Michael Caine and the woman who plays, like, Scrooge's love interest are, like, the only 2 humans we see in that whole movie. I guess, and his nephew. But it definitely felt like we were just a few Muppets short of feeling like this was a true Muppet production.
Yeah.
And I think going back to the earlier point where obviously they didn't have this ability to have recognizable Muppets, but I picture this same story working better if you have something like Uncle Deadly playing Featherstone, or you have like these known characters.
If it had been a
these
post-Muppet
roles.
show kind of thing, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like having like just
Ozzy could have been the king.
right, like having these characters we know and love play these roles is what makes it more charming a lot of the time, as opposed to just like it's charming because it's a puppet.
Then it's even weirder to know that these are all recycled puppets from a failed pilot that's also about fairy tale stuff. Gives it another layer of like, I don't know if they were trying or if they were like, I don't know why they did this, I guess, is the general feeling I got from the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think going back to like what you said about how that started off as a Snow White pilot and not really understanding what that even was going to be, it doesn't feel quite like, I don't know, like we'll get into things like the Muppet Musicians of Bremen and Emmett Otter and these things where it's like more of a realized idea. And like sometimes they're based on books and other properties that existed before the Muppets, but it's not such a just take this story of Cinderella and run with it and see what happens if we insert Muppets into it. On that note, I do like that it's not a one-to-one retelling of Cinderella, that they do take some liberties with like smashing the glass slipper and introducing some more jokes and some more things around the idea of like Kermit doesn't want to be transformed into a coach driver. He's like, I'll only do it if I get to do it as a frog. And then the horses that they get to drive the coach run off, and so they just have Splurge to like as he says, you'll be the only one arriving with a Splurge drawn coach.
And in that respect it is very Muppety, like farcical and not like dour like Cinderella's story actually is. And the lady who plays Cinderella and the prince are both super funny. Their performances are like really understated, but they're so stupid, and they like both the actors know that the characters they're playing are so stupid, and they say everything in like the most sincere way possible, and they're both totally charming. So it's like close to something, but like the writing is also not great, especially compared to Tinker D, like the Tales of Tinker D. No, yeah, the Tales of Tinker D, the all puppet one, not the one with Rufus. That is hilarious, but this is not hilarious. This is just like, oh, okay.
There's a few moments that don't feel like they're supposed to be as funny as I think they are. Like you were talking about the performances of the human actors, and there's one where Cinderella is just sitting talking to Kermit by the well. Yeah. And he says like one of his frog jokes where he's like, yeah, well, who's going to listen to a frog anyway? And she just goes, true.
I thought that was supposed to be funny.
Well, but it's just like it's so downplayed, and then they like cut to commercial after that. That I'm just like, that was very good and like very understated. But there are definitely moments where they are delivering those lines with such passion, but the line is not good.
So I guess like where I come down on it is it was pretty close to being okay, but it's also pretty close to being okay in a way that's similar to stuff like The Muppet Wizard of Oz or like It's a Wonderful Muppet Life or whatever the heck that one was called.
It's a very, very Merry Muppet Christmas or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. Where they're not good, but the Muppets are in it. So there's a few moments where you're like, haha, that was pretty good. And then you just come away from the whole thing like, okay.
For me, there was like enough good and bad that it sort of just balances out to land somewhere in the middle. Because for me, it's weird. I mentioned this earlier that there's only one song in this that they actually are like performing as a musical number. Cinderella sings like a song. I don't know if it's called If I Could Go Dancing, but that seems to be what the title
I think that's what it's
would
called,
be.
Yeah.
But it's weirdly creepy. Like it's written in a minor key. And so it's like just like boom, 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 boom. And you're just like, no, this is like a love song. Like she's singing about wishing. It's the I Want song from musicals. Yeah. But it's very weird that there's only one song in the whole thing. And very weird that it's in a minor key. And just sounds creepy.
The whole thing just feels weirdly like underbaked for something that they'd been thinking about since like 1965. And I guess what makes me feel worse about it is that there's like 3 more of these, or like 2 more of these at least. That
yeah, I don't know if they're that like similarly structured or not, because again, have not seen them. But if they're trying to lump in Emmett Otter with this, I've seen an Emmett Otter and I enjoy that. So maybe they try to tend, like, maybe they get a little bit more in that direction as they go on.
And also Jerry Jewell wrote them, I think, the next ones. And I have more faith in his writing than I do in John Stone and Tom Whedon's writing at this point. I think he gets it more. Here's my Splurge Grimace thought. I think McDonald's copied Splurge for Grimace because Grimace premiered almost, I think, 2 years after this was on American television. And he looks exactly like Grimace.
Especially early Grimace.
Yeah.
Looks less cute and more scary.
When he's the evil Grimace.
That's interesting. I'm sure, like, Henson things had to be an influence on the idea of a Grimace. They happened to fall onto the McDonald's wiki looking at Grimace's page. And there's a thing in here that just says, Grimace was last seen at Dodger Stadium on July 18th, 2012.
I saw that too.
I'm like, wait, is he missing? Like, it sounds like he went missing after that baseball game and we can't track him down. If anyone has seen Grimace, let us know.
Splurge knocked him off.
Well, speaking of Splurge, he is our Muppet of the Week, which might seem like an odd Muppet of the Week because so far we've focused on some pretty, main characters. But he's important, obviously, to Hey Cinderella and a few other things. So I did want to give him his due because he makes his premiere kind of in this, at least as like a full character. This is sort
He'd been part of skits before, right?
Well, and we saw him in the Muppets on Puppets special where he storms through and destroys the set and then has to clean up after it. And he appears in an Ed Sullivan Show sketch where he's like running through the crowd. But in that one, he's referred to as a mother monster. So it's not really like the same character as Splurge. But Splurge, I literally had in my notes, is a large purple grimace looking puppet. He's a full body puppet, which means he's worn like a mascot costume, and he was built in 1965 for the original Hey Cinderella pilot. So he was the first larger than life full bodied Muppet that they built.
Ever?
Yes. So he predated the LeChoy Dragon. So that's why Splurge is, one, important, and two, sort of more attached to Hey Cinderella than other things, is because he was created for the Cinderella pilot. He was performed by Frank Oz, probably adding to Oz's dislike of performing full-body puppets that we talked about in the episode. We're talking about the LeChoy Dragon and how he didn't necessarily want to be Big Bird because he didn't want another full-body costume on. But Splurge quickly started to change visually. Splurge didn't stay looking like the Hey Cinderella Splurge for that long. There is a much more blue-toned Splurge, and that's the one that makes the appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show. And then around the same time as this was coming out, in the first season of Sesame Street, we get a different version of Splurge, which has like two eyes with like eyelashes instead of a big unibrow.
Even more grimacy looking.
Yes, actually.
Oh my God.
So it was almost like you could look at Splurge from Hey Cinderella, Splurge on Sesame Street, and then Grimace's first puppet or first costume and go, clearly that's an evolution.
A Pokemon evolution.
Yeah. Final form, Grimace.
So yeah, it's Splurge with four. This is back when Grimace had 4 arms too. So that's a
Grimace had
classic
4
Pokemon
arms?
thing. Yeah, he originally had 4 arms so he could steal your food.
But yeah, these earlier different versions of Splurge kind of only share the fact that he's fluffy purple and has one sharp tooth. The eyes change. They get sadder, more cute. And
he's really cute on Sesame Street. I'm looking at him right now. I'd never seen that, I don't think.
But the behavior also changes. Like, it's not the same, like, radish kind of, like, Splurge that we get in Hey Cinderella, which I don't know. I found him this, like, charming giant, sort of like Andre the Giant in Princess Bride. Like, you have this muscle who's not the smartest, but is nice to have around. But then Splurge sort of has a resurgence, a brief resurgence in the late 90s. There was a Jim Henson company. They created this series of books called Jim Henson's Scary, Scary Monsters. And this was like a line of children's books inspired by Jim Henson's like monster sketches that he did of all just like random puppets. So there was 7 monster friends in this like story that they built up around them. And they were all from the secret land of Over There. And 6 of the monsters were new and created for this book line. And Splurge was the only already existing monster that they let into this club.
What the heck? So
it seemed like they had some reverence for Splurge as like an established Muppet that they wanted to keep relevant. But it didn't last that long. They weren't super popular. But he had his own book called New Friend, Blue Friend, where he's much cuter and drawn in a very, like, a lot closer to Cookie Monster type of style.
Yeah. Got a way more eyelashes now.
Yeah, but the story of that book is that he befriends like a slipper, like a blue fluffy slipper that ends up in their land of monsters. And along with that, they actually had some Splurge merchandise that came out. KFC apparently had these promotional toys for the Scary Scary Monsters line that were shoelace munchers.
Oh, yeah.
Like you would like thread your shoelaces through.
Keep your shoes tied.
Yeah, and put them on. I actually looked for these on eBay. I cannot find them anywhere because I was like, oh, I would not mind a Splurge shoelace muncher on my new Kermit Adidas. That'd be a good little combo.
KFC has toys?
I think they must have just been trying to compete because, I don't remember really getting toys from KFC ever as a kid. But there was also another Splurge piece of merchandise released in conjunction with Hey Cinderella as like a promotional material. It was a plastic hand puppet, like those really cheap plasticky ones that rip in like 5 seconds.
It's like a plastic bag, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of McDonald's, that's where I remember those specifically from, is they used to have like Ronald McDonald ones you could get. But it was a promotion on cans of Hawaiian Punch, because Hawaiian Punch's like parent company was one of the companies that also sponsored the U.S. premiere of Hey Cinderella. And they did some Hawaiian Punch commercials around this time as well that unfortunately I cannot track down and find. But apparently there was a promotion on Hawaiian Punch cans where you could send away and get this plastic Splurge puppet, which also not available on eBay. Already checked. But yeah, Splurge currently is on display at the Center for Puppetry Arts in Atlanta with a lot of other puppets. They also have Gosh Posh, and they also have Tamanella Grindelwald.
Cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of like potential Muppet road trip places that I want to see that have these puppets on display. Like I was looking up the Wizard of Id puppet is at like, I don't know, some college in Connecticut or something. I don't really know why, but maybe they filmed it there. There's a lot of these fun puppets that are just in like weird places that aren't all collected in one spot.
Well, we'll go see them all someday.
Yeah, we'll have a little moving right along field trip.
Yeah.
When...
We'll get in a lot of fights, I bet.
But yeah, that's pretty much it on Splurge. But I do want to know your feelings on Splurge, because I like Splurge in the small times we have been able to see him.
Sure. I liked him in Hey Cinderella quite a bit. I thought like you said earlier, it was really cute that Kermit just had like a big mean monster that he was buddies with. I think I'm putting a lot of my feelings towards the Grimace onto Splurge though, because I kind of love him, but I also love the Grimace. I don't necessarily think I have any strong feelings on Splurge one way or the other. But if there was a world where he was the main big Muppet instead of Sweetums, I might be okay with that.
Yeah, I feel like he doesn't get his same due when like later on we get a lot more of these full body Muppets dancing around like Dog Leon and Sweetums and all this. Like we don't get to see. I think Thog is the other one, the big blue one. So maybe Thog sort of like took over the place of Splurge.
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know about you, Sam, but my life has definitely been taken over by Muppets recently. I think that's makes sense that we're doing this podcast, and there's been a lot of Muppet stuff in my life. And I just keep diving deeper and deeper and buying more books and reading more things and watching more interviews. And so I need to pull back sometimes. And I think as we go on, maybe I'll be able to pull back a little further. But was there anything non-Muppety that you got to enjoy this week?
I watched 9 to 5. You ever seen that movie?
Oh, yeah.
I had never seen it before.
That's a good movie.
It's Dolly Parton and,
Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda.
Lily Tomlin, that's the one. And it's like an 80, it's like was made in 80. Everybody dresses so cool, but it's set in like an office where these 3 ladies hate their boss. And then they tie him to the ceiling basically and like run the office in his stead and do all these kind of like really progressive changes to offices that would still be great if they existed. And it was fun. It is kind of long. It drags a little bit, but the beginning especially is like hilarious. And those 3 ladies are so funny. And I was a very pleasant surprise. It kind of felt like Ghostbusters, except with ladies instead of guys. And Lily Tomlin is so good in it. It was like her first movie too.
We will definitely have some more Lily Tomlin talk on this podcast because she has some run-ins with the Muppets. Dolly Parton as well. Jane Fonda, less so. Looking into her, she introduces the Muppets at one of the Oscar ceremonies, but that's it.
How about you, Matthew? I know one big thing you were working on all week.
Yeah, but that's very Muppet related.
But that was very Muppety, yeah.
Yeah, I was building the Sesame Street Lego set, which was very fun, but very much still keeping my brain in Muppet mood. And so the thing that I was enjoying this week that was not Muppet related was Rutherford Falls. It's a new
What is that?
It's a new Peacock show with Ed Helms and a bunch of other people that are really great. And yeah, it's made by the same people who made, I think it's like the same guy who made like The Good Place and Parks and Rec and stuff.
Michael Schur.
Yeah, Michael Schur, who's at least involved in a bunch of those things. So you see some of the same actors who pop up in The Good Place and The Office and Parks and Rec. And at first, I wasn't sure really what it was or how to feel about it because it's sort of like Ed Helms plays this guy who, his name's Nathan Rutherford. His family founded this town hundreds of years ago, and like family pride is a really big thing. And I wasn't sure that was enough to like carry this show, but what it turns out is that it's more focused on the characters, like the indigenous people who live in the area. And now there's like a casino in the area, and there's a fictional tribe. It's the Minneshanka tribe that exists in this. And when the show starts with that sort of thing, you kind of get like a weird Spidey sense of like, uh-oh, this could go poorly because shows have not handled native stories well in the past. But looking into it, one, all of the actors who are playing like Native Americans are actually Native American. And then also one of the co-creators of the show, Sierra Teller Ornelas, is Navajo and Mexican American. So it's nice that it's not just Michael Schur and Ed Helms created this show together. And it's really interesting. It has Dustin Milligan from Schitt's Creek in it as well. And I like what it's doing. I don't know that it's like pushing over into that like great comedy of all time kind of thing, but it's enjoyable. It's fun. It's nice to have like a new little sitcom to watch that's also dealing with important issues of this really privileged, entitled white dude who feels like, this is my town. We founded this hundreds of years ago. And his best friend being a woman who is part of the Minneshanka tribe and is like, well, slow down. My family actually was here before your family. And it seems to be like that's where it's sort of coming to a head, is that the Minneshanka people are coming for him and are trying to sort of be like, well, no, you don't get to be this guy anymore. You don't get to claim all this heritage and rights to this land. We are going to. But yeah, it's a good watch if you're just looking for something quick.
And you have Peacock.
Yeah, and you have Peacock, which is free, I think, for
with
certain
commercials or something.
things.
Shows.
Yeah, there's like 3 different tiers to Peacock that I don't entirely understand. So next week, we are leaving the 60s behind. We are delving into the 1970s. Specifically, we are covering everything from 1970 that they did, which is not a lot. We've talked previously about some of the Ed Sullivan appearances that they made in 1970, so we're not going to be retreading those waters. But outside of that, they didn't do a ton, so we'll be talking about the television special, The Great Santa Claus Switch, which we mentioned earlier, which is the first appearance of Gonzo, who will be our Muppet of the Week next week. And we'll also be watching some early Flip Wilson show appearances and a weird little Big Bird interview that I found that's only like a minute long, but I feel like it's worth watching because it's weird. But yeah, that's all the stuff they did in 1970, aside from, again, like I said, some of the stuff we already talked about.
Sesame Street must have keeping them real busy.
I think that's the case, because even looking into the Wizard of Id pilot that we talked about briefly, I think Joan Cooney or somebody was interviewed talking about that and basically said that once people started to look into that more and like were interested in maybe developing it into something bigger, Jim Henson was too busy.
Too late.
So it didn't really go anywhere, partially because it wasn't good probably, but also partially because by the time they thought about it in any reality, Jim Henson was busy with Sesame Street.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, I guess, like right out the gate, how busy Jim Henson probably was working on Sesame Street, but also that he was still focused on getting these other specials out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the next batch of episodes, we'll probably be going kind of year by year of like tackling everything from 1970 and then 71, 72, 73, because they're not doing a ton of things in each of those years. But if there's something longer that we want to talk about more in depth, we'll probably split up into its own episode. But for next week, it'll be everything from 1970 that we can get our hands on.
I'm excited to watch a Christmas special.
A Christmas special in the end of May.
Yeah.
The best time to watch
That's
a
when
Christmas
you need
special.
that's when you need a little bit of Christmas spirit the most.
But yeah, if you want to check all of those things out, we'll have the playlist tweeted out at Commitment Pod. And before we go, we want to thank our friends Tuna for creating the music for this podcast and Cassie Wilson for singing our theme song. And you can follow this podcast on Twitter at the previously mentioned at Commitment Pod, where you can find the playlist and other fun things we're tweeting out. You can also email us at mail@commitment.com if you have any Muppet memories you'd like to share with us or just questions for us. And you can follow me at Matthew Gatos.
And I'm at Slam Schultz.
And as always, keep believing.
Keep pretending.